when any of us go on a conscious journey where we're willing to go beyond where we've gone before, and we surrender over to soul, and we experience going beyond the ordinary, and we're outside of time, we expand ourselves in some way, and then we have to come back to earth. We have to come back to the ground, and we have to come back to where we came from. But many of us can fall into the seduction that the boon or the culmination point is what it's all about. And then we start to lean back, and look back at where we came from and begin to glorify that more than what it was for. And the whole point of any worthwhile journey is to turn what you have inside yourself out into the world and offer it in service. And the world's not sitting there saying, "Oh boy, we can't wait for you to come back from your journey and show us what magical things you've learned." And for me, I've experienced this many times in my work with people, that they tend to turn back and not want to face the most daunting thing of all, which is bringing what's alive out into the world as the world is, not to change the world, but to contribute to it. And one of the practices that we have in our program is that when we go home from a profound experience, we simply do one simple practice, which would be when we're experiencing anything that's troubling or trying, that we pause and we sit with it and say, what's my authentic response to this? Not reaction, but how would I respond to what's happening now that would be a contribution to what's happening and not a reaction against it? And that one thing alone is a way to bring the boon back home and the gift home, rather than to look for the ego to be gratified. So, the refusal of the return is a falling back asleep into ego gratification rather than service of the call of the soul. Because the soul calls us back home.
What experiences do you see denoting the return journey or the flight?
Well, the flight is the fleeing away from the return. And we want to stay in the air, and we want to stay expanded because we love those moments of expansion, those moments of insight or awakening. But the return is always a reconciliation and accepting of ordinary life. And the older we get, the more we come to understand that our ability to take comfort and satisfaction out of the ordinary things of life is what grounds us and makes us useful to people, not super ordinary. And there's a tendency to get lost in the return because we're drawn to all the larger than life things, as superheroes are, and not to bring our very best and our most dynamic, vital selves to the ordinary things of life. And that's where we can be of service to people. One of the things that I was practicing after the summer's journey is I tend to be more introverted by nature. And so when I'm in public, I don't tend to engage people very much. And I just decided for 40 days that whenever I'd be in public, I would actively engage people I don't know. And it changed the way the world is. I can't believe how friendly people actually are. It's an attitude of mine where I just decide I'm a part of this world and I'm just going to engage people in dialogue, and people respond in kind. And it's such a small thing in that way. It changes my perception of the goodness of the world, so that as I look to make larger gestures and more outreaches, that I'll have the courage to engage the world differently than I might typically when I'm being shy.
Somewhat along those lines, it sounds like you gave us a personal example. There's this, I think we're hitting on the possibility for the flight and the regression or the return. Do you see this as a point where regression is a major risk?
Well, all along the journey, regression is a major risk. And what we cannot do positively, we will do negatively. And when we can't go forward, we will go backward. And regression has more to do with indulgence. And when I regress, I'm more into myself, and I'm more into my ideas about myself. And I'm in the smaller parts of myself and self-concerns, because I don't want to face, and I struggle to face, what I have to do, or the discomforts I have to go through in order to stretch and grow and to know you and to take an interest in you and to bear our differentness. That takes work. And when we avoid the real work of the journey, we'll tend to want to regress. And regression is a very convenient distraction. And we regress into our troubledness, the familiarity of our troubledness. We're prone to be more depressive. We start to go towards it, or anxiety. We get more self-concerned about our anxieties rather than staying on the edge of whatever's going to move our lives forward and make a difference with other people. So we can indulge both our flaws, or we can indulge our journey by glorifying it and making it about, who we are and what we accomplish, as opposed to whether or not other people find it useful.
So how would you suggest an individual avoids regression, or what kind of tactics do you employ on your journeys so that your participants don't regress? That's
called other people. Other people keep us from regressing that know us, because they tell us and they call us on it. But, we don't really avoid regression, because regression itself is an avoidance. What we do is we watch when it happens. Everything on a journey has to do with being there and being present to what's happening and noticing when I'm feeling regressive, or when I start feeling smaller, when I start expecting less of myself, or when I'm pushing myself too hard. So the function of regression is to distract us from progression and to keep us from the resources and the focus we need to keep moving forward because of our insecurities or fears. So the thing that we would do is, if with any problem, and this is the work I do in my office with people all the time, is rather than collapse or turn against yourself because of your problem, could you actually look at it? It's the capacity to look deeply into what troubles you. That's the skill of a 21st century hero hack, in my opinion. It's the ability to look right into the face of trouble and not try to eliminate it. Most trouble is a result of trying to get out of trouble or to avoid the trouble, rather than to simply look deeply into the trouble, learn to bear it, and have an authentic response to it, which is not easy.